But Snot Boogie always stole the money. Why'd you let him play? Got to. This America, man.
The Wire is considered one of the greatest TV shows of all time by anybody who watched it, by any list you can find on Google, and I wanted to find out why. So I'm watching every season of The Wire to see if it really is that good and does it hold up over 20 years later. And all I can say is,
I gotta tell you, I'm a huge fan of The Wire.
after only watching the first season of The Wire is the greatest TV show of all time. And not because of its action or its drama.
Do it, goddammit, if you're gonna...
But because The Wire tells the universal truth of what life is like in America without sugarcoating the details. Season 1 of The Wire doesn't just tell a story about niggas in the hood. It shows you how the game is rigged.
You follow drugs, you get drug addicts and drug dealers. But you start to follow the money, and you don't know where the fuck it's gonna take you.
Like how I thought this video was going to be a basic recap of season 1 of The Wire, but the more I watched The Wire, the more I realized this video has to be about how The Wire deconstructs our capitalist society. On the surface, it's about drugs and cops in Baltimore, but if you're really paying attention and dig beneath the surface, it's about how the systems that built society are the very same systems that are destroying it. Bureaucracy, institutions, and ultimately capitalism. This video breaks down season 1 of The Wire not just as a story, but as a case study in capitalism, in institutions, and in people trying to survive when the rules are rigged from the start. So let's get into it. The series opens up with the death of Snot Boogie.
What kind of stupid name is that?
Now, Snot Boogie isn't important to anyone in the show, nor the story of The Wire, but that intro scene is when we're introduced to both Detective McNulty and the concept of the game. In season 1, the quote-unquote game is a double entendre. On the surface, it represents the drug trade, but on a deeper subtextual level, it is a metaphor for the larger societal issues and power dynamics that dictate the lives of individuals. For example, when Snot Boogie was a kid, instead of helping him with a tissue because he had a runny nose, they gave him the name Snot Boogie, and that became his role for the rest of his life. And when his life was over, the game continued, foreshadowing that even though you're dead, the game doesn't stop.
Doesn't seem fair. Life just be that way, I guess.
The very next scene, we get to see the game in action. We see McNulty laughing with his partner Bunk about the "This is America" quote, and the irony is that McNulty is heading into the trial of DAngelo Barksdale, where McNulty is about to learn firsthand this is America. And in America, the criminal justice system is broken, which is one of the many themes that The Wire explores throughout the first season. McNulty witnesses that broken system as DAngelo Barksdale, who killed a man in broad daylight, is found not guilty when 2 of the witnesses of the shooting got intimidated on some gangster shit by the Barkstdale crew into changing their testimonies. This court scene is only about 8 minutes long, but it introduces us to everything we need to know about the world of The Wire and how it works. McNulty uses the fact that DAngelo Barksdale beat the case as an opportunity to go after the bigger fish in the Barkstdale drug empire, Avon Barksdale and his right-hand man Stringer Bell. The Barkstdale crew, they represent capitalism at its purest form. We'll get into capitalism more later in the video, but for now, here's a simple definition of capitalism. Capitalism is when a person or entity like a group or a crew, aka the Barkstdale crew, own things like a product and can sell them for profit. In capitalism, the person or the crew decides what to make or sell based on what the consumer wants to buy, and prices are set by how much people are willing to pay based on supply and demand. The end goal is to make money. And if that is the goal, you can see how the Barkstdale crew is capitalism at its purest form, because they're all about making their money. They're even structured like a corporation, with Avon as the CEO and you have Stringer Bell as the COO. The board is made up of the rest of the crew's enforcers, and under them you have middle management people like DAngelo, and at the bottom you have the regular workers, the street dealers and the YNs of the crew. After DAngelo beats his murder charge is when the story of The Wire really begins. The police, the judge, everyone is shocked that he was found not guilty. Everyone but Stringer Bell, the second in command of the Barkstdale organization, because not only did they tamper with the witnesses, you can see Weebay, the main enforcer of the Barkstdale crew, give a look to one of the jurors, showing just how far their reach goes, which shakes the system. A bunch of black niggas from the hood wielding that kind of power. Race is another big theme that is explored in The Wire, but this makes Judge Phelan, who was presiding over the case, furious. McNulty uses his connection to the judge to create a specialized detail to go after the Barkstdale gang. But this isn't about justice or the law. McNulty doesn't really care about the victims. We kind of see that in the first scene with Snot Boogie. It's more about McNulty proving that he's smarter than the system, because in capitalism, recognition is also currency. That happens throughout the first season, like when DAngelo was telling the pit crew about how he killed Deidre. We later find out that it was actually Weebay that killed her, but he was telling them that it was him to write off of Weebay's clout and cachet to boost himself up. We also see this happen throughout the entirety of the police force. When the Barkstdale detail was formed, nobody really wanted their name associated with it. But once they started getting results, everybody and their mama wanted their name attached to it so they can write off the clout, because recognition, again, is currency in this system. That's why the police department cares more about arrests than they actually care about the convictions. They want buy busts that lead to coke on the table instead of long investigations. For those of you who don't know, a buy bust is when the police or law enforcement buys drugs from a dealer or supplier and arrest that dealer or supplier, and case closed. Because they don't necessarily care where the drugs are coming from or stopping the flow. They're rewarded for productivity, not systemic change. This is how capitalist systems work. Output is valued over impact. If you don't generate measurable gains, your work just doesn't matter. By the end of the first episode, the Barkstdale crew flexed their muscle again with the death of William Gant, one of the witnesses from DAngelo's murder case. Even with a hit that obvious, the police department still isn't willing to allocate enough resources to tackle the Barkstdale gang. And that's because if you've been to any government office like the DMV, you'll know that government bureaucracy is the most inefficiently ran nightmare you can ever be a part of. Now compare that to how fast and efficient the Barkstdale crew run their organization. From creating the product to collecting the money and distributing the product, it's all done with ruthless efficiency, where if you mess up, you pay for it with your life. Their business is structured, hierarchical, and strictly profit driven. The Wire at its core is a social critique of American institutions. Nowhere is that critique more apparent than in the way that The Wire portrays the drug game, not as a basic street hustle, but as a fully operational capitalist machine. And nothing represents this better than the Barkstdale organization in season 1. On the surface, the Barkstdale crew is a powerful West Baltimore drug gang built on fear, reputation, and territory. But underneath, it mirrors every function of a modern corporation: executive leadership, middle management, labor divisions, competition, branding, logistics, internal policies, and even corporate ethics. Each member has a defined role, and the organization values productivity and loyalty above all else. It's capitalism in its purest form, unregulated, profit-obsessed, and devoid of any oversight. It's structured like the modern-day corporation, and its culture comes from the top of the organization. Avon Barksdale, the CEO.
The thing is, you only got to fuck up once.
As the head of the organization, Avon sets the tone, vision, and corporate culture. Like a CEO, he doesn't touch the product, he rarely engages with the street-level workers, and delegates the day-to-day operations to his trusted lieutenants. It's the same way that CEOs insulate themselves from liability while still being in control. Take how he handles territory, for example. When Omar starts robbing his stash houses, Avon puts a bounty on Omar and his crew. It sends a message. What comes off as street logic is actually corporate crisis management. He assesses the threat to the brand. Getting robbed by Omar creates an image that the Barkstdale crew is vulnerable, and Avon knows perception is everything. In the streets, your brand is your name, and it carries enormous weight. This focus on perception is why Avon is so obsessed with remaining invisible. He avoids telephones, avoids being photographed, and stays off the corners. CEOs today spend millions on reputation consultants and public relations to stay above scandal. Those who don't end up at Coldplay concerts, but I digress. With Avon's method, it works. By the time he's arrested at the end of the first season, he has no prior criminal record, and despite being the head of the organization, he's able to negotiate a favorable plea deal, essentially a slap on the wrist. Stringer Bell, the COO.
I ain't you stupid motherfucker. You made the decision.
What makes Stringer so compelling is that he sees the game as purely economics. It's all about the money. He takes community college classes on macroeconomics, talks about things like the elasticity of demand, and even tries to run his organization like a corporate boardroom. Throughout the first season, you see him trying to take the vertically integrated structure of the gang and blend it into the legal economy. He even creates divisions of labor. Street dealers don't know the suppliers, enforcers don't know where the stash houses are located. This helps protect the higher ups and maintains control, which is why when it came time to take down the Barkstdale crew, the police couldn't arrest Stringer Bell. He was too insulated from the crimes. So when he orders his murder, it's not because he hates Wallace. I don't think Stringer feels anything for Wallace. This was all about minimizing his risk. This code calculus is exactly how many corporations operate. Layoffs, environmental harm, or sweatshop labor are justified by risk assessment, not emotion. To Stringer, Wallace was just a liability, and liabilities are to be eliminated. And even though he lacks humanity and emotion, because of his foresight, when most of the senior members of the Barkstdale crew were either arrested or killed by the end of the first season, Stringer was still standing and business was still running because he was focused on the economics and nothing else. DAngelo Barksdale, middle management and the morality crisis.
Yeah, but the game ain't gotta be played like that, yo. You can't tell me this shit can't get done without people beating on each other.
DAngelo might be one of the most interesting characters in this first season. What makes DAngelo stand out from the rest of the crew is the fact that he sees the human cost of business. DAngelo is also the only character in The Wire that questions the morality of capitalism, particularly what happens to individuals who develop a conscious and an exploitative system. You see how he talks to Wallace and Bodhi like a big brother, not like a boss. He jokes, he tries to mentor them, and he even shows regret over his past crimes. He's one of the only characters who doesn't just accept the game's logic, he questions it and the impact that it's having on people's lives. And he knows he doesn't fit in. That's why he takes so much time working on his appearance, his clothes, because he's trying to disguise himself into the type of person that could thrive in this system. And what I think might be one of the best scenes in this entire season, DAngelo uses chess as a metaphor for the drug game. When he sees Bodhi and Wallace playing checkers on a chessboard, he explains to them how the king is the king and the pawns stay the pawns. He knows that they're pawns at this point, and there's no upward mobility for them at all.
That look, the pawns, man, in the game, they get capped quick.
Stringer and Avon keep DAngelo where he is because even though he's part of the game, DAngelo isn't cut out for it. Even though DAngelo understands the rules, he struggles between diving deep into the game and his inner conscious. This inner conflict grows as the season progresses. When Wallace falls apart after the brutal execution of Brandon, Omar's boyfriend, DAngelo actually tries to help him. He gives him money, tells him to go back to school, and even stands up to Stringer and Avon so they can let Wallace go. But in a corporate machine obsessed with results and loyalty, his attempt to be human is perceived as a weakness, and Stringer ultimately has Wallace killed. That death breaks DAngelo. He sees the cost, and when it finally hits close to home, and he knows it didn't need to happen, but here's what makes things so interesting. DAngelo was wrong. He, just like the rest of the Barkstdale crew, didn't know that Wallace had snitched, and he was a star witness for the police. His death actually saves Stringer and the organization. So that makes DAngelo's arc one of the purest illustrations in The Wire of how capitalism crushes the individual's soul. The pit crew, the street level workforce, and capitalism's disposable class. At the bottom of the Barkstdale organization is the pit, a literal and figurative trench of capitalism. Located in the low-rise projects of West Baltimore, the pit is where the product is moved, the money is made. It is the cost center, the warehouse floor, the retail front of a highly structured corporation, even though it doesn't look like it. And just like in any large capitalist system, the people who do the hardest work are also the most expendable. Wallace, the human cost. Wallace is the emotional heart of the pit. He's only 16 years old, but he's already doing all the labor of a hardened drug dealer. But he still has remnants of his childhood left in him. We still see him playing with toys, and he's also innocent. We see him taking care of a bunch of little kids who live in an abandoned house with no parents, and he's taking on that responsibility to care for them so they can have a childhood where he knows he doesn't have one. Making sure they go to school, he provides for them, and genuinely reacts to the violence around him with horror. When Omar's boyfriend Brandon is tortured and killed, Wallace was the one who doomed him when he pointed him out to Stringer Bell, so he blames himself for Brandon's death. Psyche begins to unravel. The guilt just eats at him, and he stops working. He actually starts using drugs at 16, and the saddest part about all of this is the fact that Wallace's mom is alive and well, but she's neglecting him because of money. Because the system is put in place where they don't have the resources, and I'm not gonna cap, the fact that she's an alcoholic all play a part into what ultimately doomed Wallace to death. Wallace is what happens when you're at the bottom of the system and you just won't play the game. Bodhi, the ideal worker.
Okay, this is just my opinion, but the juvenile system in this city is fucked up. It's a big ass fucking joke.
Bodhi is also 16, but he is exactly what capitalism wants from a worker. He doesn't question the morality of what they're doing. For Bodhi, the job is the job. And if you get caught, you do your time, you keep your mouth shut. He's the kind of worker any corporation would reward, even if that corporation is a drug gang. Wallace is his friend, and Stringer knew this, so when Stringer had Bodhi kill Wallace, it was a test to see if Bodhi was really committed to the game. And of all the characters in the pit, Bodhi is the most hardcore of them all. In the first season, we know almost nothing about Bodhi's life. All we know is Bodhi rides for the Barkstdales. Bodhi has been beaten by police numerous times. Remember, he's 16 years old, so he's a minor. He's escaped prison, he didn't snitch when he was picked up, and even in the courthouse, he knew exactly what to say to get out of jail time. He doesn't break, and most importantly, he doesn't flinch when his loyalty is tested. He doesn't care about his role in the system or the game. He doesn't care what their product is moving. All he cares about is making his money. The survivor. Who shocked me like 3 times this season. 1, the fact that he has a girlfriend. 2, he shot his best friend Wallace in cold blood twice. And 3, he was the last man standing and was in charge of the pit at the end of the season. Hood is often seen as comic relief, but he also represents another aspect of the capitalist system. The bottom tier laborer that keeps their head down and keeps on going without ruffling the system. Because he keeps his head down and doesn't ruffle any feathers, by the end of the season, he's running the pit. Because he works with the system and doesn't ruffle it, he can get benefit from it. Some people are allowed to get benefits from the system because capitalism as a whole has benefited a lot more people than it hasn't. If you're able to keep your head down and you do what you're told, it can reward you. It might not always, but there is a possibility, and Poot is one of those rare occurrences that if you just keep doing your job and keep climbing, you're gonna rise with the company, and eventually you're gonna have to fall with the company, but that's what happens when you put your entire stock into one type of system. I think the worst aspect of the pit is that there's no ladder out. Unlike the myths of meritocracy that capitalism promotes, The Wire is brutally honest about the limits of upward mobility. Wallace tries to leave and is murdered. There's no promotions with benefits, no retirement plans, no safety nets. Injury or arrest means you're gone. Death is always looming, and nobody above will fight for you. This is how capitalism often treats its lowest tier, not as people, but as cogs. If one breaks, another will replace it. Omar Little. Omar might be the most interesting character I saw this entire first season. In a world where everything is for sale, Omar walks through Baltimore's drug economy not as a participant. In a world where everything is commodified, Omar is a man with a code, and a man has to have a code. Omar is a contradiction to every rule that the game is built upon, especially the street game. The fact that he's an openly gay man in the fact that he's an openly gay man in the fact that he's an openly gay man in this hyper masculine culture. Not just that, he's working with police, spitting in the face of anti-snitch culture. And that's why his presence is a critical counterpoint to the Barkstdale operation, because at its core, capitalism depends on predictable behavior. Producers produce, consumers consume it, and everyone plays their part in the pursuit of profit. That's what makes Omar so dangerous. He's not a competitor in the market to the Barksdales. He's a force that undermines their entire structure. He does it by taking their product, their money, and essentially their power simply because he can. Omar's famous line, "A man's gotta have a code," isn't just a personal mantra, it's a way of life. In a capitalist world where loyalty, friendship, and ethics are all expendable in the name of profit, Omar imposes a form of morality that exists outside of economics. He doesn't rob civilians, he doesn't kill unless it's necessary, he doesn't take orders from anybody, and in a system built on greed, Omar operates on principle. Compare that to the Barkstdale crew, who will execute their own people if the business demands it. Yet The Wire makes it clear that Omar's defiance comes at a price. He lost his boyfriend, he's alone, he's hunted, isolated, and he ultimately has to leave the city because he's one man against an entire system. But the thing is, Omar wouldn't be Omar if he just left. And by the end of the season, he's back. And now that Avon is behind bars, I can't wait to see how they expand on his character in the following season, because he's a force of chaos that really exposes just how hypocritical all of this is. The police. In The Wire, the Baltimore Police Department isn't portrayed as a force for justice or reform. It's not a bastion of morality pitted against the corruption of the drug game. Instead, the police as an institution mirror the very capitalist dysfunctions they're supposedly meant to regulate. They're underfunded, overmanaged, politically manipulated, and driven by metrics. Rather than fixing the problems caused by the drug trade, they oftentimes reinforce them because of their incentives. Like everyone else's, are tied to career advancement, image, and funding. They don't care about truth or change. Just as the Barkstdale crew runs like a corporation, the police operate like a bloated bureaucratic company. One of the things that The Wire showed and that I really liked was that The Wire showed that the police aren't just ineffective, they're actively complicit. The war on drugs gives the illusion of action while doing nothing to address poverty, unemployment, institutional collapse that fuels the drug trade in the first place. Instead, they go after the same poor neighborhoods over and over, as if arresting Bodie 10 more times is gonna somehow change his reality. Department is addicted to numbers, arrests, clearing rates, drug busts, gun recovered. These stats are treated like quarterly profit margins. Commissioner Burrell and his command staff don't really care about crime reduction. They care about making the numbers look good for City Hall to make sure that their guys get reelected. It's not about stopping the drugs or protecting people. It's about looking good on paper. This obsession with performance data mirrors the logic of capitalist institutions, especially in late-stage capitalism. And for those of you who don't know what late-stage capitalism is what we are going through now. It's the current phase of capitalism, which is all about globalization with the dominance of multinational corporations where everything is commodified, which is why we see such an extreme wealth inequality in the world. Mind you, this is The Wire addressing these things over 20 years ago, so that just goes to show the critique that The Wire was giving was actual factual. McNulty. Detective Jimmy McNulty is a mess of contradictions. He's a good cop, but he's insubordinate, he's reckless, and he's relentless. But what sets him apart is he wants to do actual police work. Even if it's for selfish glory, it's his relationship, if you can call it that, with Stringer Bell. The fact that Stringer and the Barkstdale gang keep getting the better of not just the system but McNulty, it almost makes it feel personal. He sees that the war on drugs is being waged with almost zero strategy, and he believes that the targets should be the top of the food chain, not the bottom. But the department doesn't want long investigations, they don't want to shake the system. And at first you think McNulty is the good guy, outsmarting the system to try to do what's right. And in a different kind of show, he'd be a star, he'd be the hero, the main character. But in The Wire, he's just another cog in the machine. We see how he lets the case consume him, Daniels, Freeman, and the good cops. Lieutenant Cedric Daniels and Lester Freeman are the two black cops on the detail, and they represent a different kind of resistance to the police force, different than McNulty, because they're more slow, strategic, and principled. Daniels is cautious and politically savvy. Daniels initially comes off as suspicious and working with the system, but it's not that he's working with the system. He wants to do what's right, but he also knows how to play the game. As the season goes on, you start to see that he's a very savvy player. While he won't change the system, he knows how to work within the system to do the maximum good he can, while also arranging himself to maybe get a promotion or get something out of it. So he's playing the game, and that's one of the ways he can actually move up in his rank. On the opposite side, the flip side, another variation of the good cop is Freeman on the other hand. And to me, he's the best cop on the show. But in the world of The Wire, that isn't always rewarded. As a detective who solved the case, Lester was banished and demoted to the pawn shop unit for insubordination. But the insubordination was not playing along with the system and not feeding into what the higher ups wanted, but actually serving justice. And for doing his job, Lester's career was destroyed. Because in a system where capitalism infects even institutions meant to provide justice, Freeman's story shows that you can do everything right, but in the end, the machine doesn't care. Detective Keema Gregory might be one of the most competent and dedicated officers in the entire Baltimore Police Department, and as a black openly gay woman operating in a hyper-masculine, politically charged institution, she approaches her job with a genuine desire to make the difference. Keema isn't interested in the stats or politics. She even gives it up to some of her co-workers, she only cares about the work and doing it the right way. The fact that she's already an outsider by being black, a woman, and gay, and because of that, she isn't really entrenched in the system, which is why she's able to handle confidential informants with care. Like her relationship with Bubbles, a vulnerable addict and an informant, highlights her humanistic approach to treating people in the game, not just as tools but as human beings caught in larger systems of oppression. Keema also acts like a bridge between McNulty and Daniels, embodying the perfect kind of cop that the system should want more of if it were a righteous and good system. But because she's not packaged in the way that they want her to be, so she isn't given the proper respect she should be given. And then you have the Three Stooges, because in season 1 of The Wire, Perez, Herc, and Carver represent a different aspect of the Baltimore Police Department. These are the foot soldiers of the institution. They're the antithesis of Bodie, Poot, and Wallace. Their arcs across the season explores what happens when ill-equipped men are thrust in the middle of a complex drug war without the proper training, wisdom, or even the moral clarity to navigate through it. Like Prez, for example, begins the season arguably the least competent person in the entire police department. He's given a spot on the detail not because of his skills or anything that he brings, but because of political pressure from a high-ranking individual. So nepotism, just like DAngelo. Some of his early actions include blinding a teenager with his gun, shooting his gun in the office and in his car, making him a dangerous liability on the streets. But once you take him out of the streets and under the mentorship of Freeman, Perez begins to find his place in the police department, not on the street but behind the desk, cracking codes and piecing together the Barkstdale organization's infrastructure. It's in his character's progression we see how institutions often misplace people and how a person's value can be missed entirely when they're judged by the wrong metrics. Perez, once seen as useless, becomes one of the most crucial members to understanding the details wiretap and their financial investigations. And the flip side of that, you have Carver and Herc. Both of them start off as comic relief, thuggish, arrogant, and often ignorant and racist. But over the season, they are slowly confronted with the consequences of their behavior. Both of them evolve differently though. Herc remains largely static as the same character throughout the first season. He's more obsessed about being a detective, but more so his bruising ways, muscling the streets and action, than with actually building cases. He wants results and drug busts, but he also wants the recognition. Carver, on the flip side, begins working with Burrell behind the details back. His journey is paved by growing awareness though of what real policing requires. By the end of the season, Carver played the bureaucratic games with Burrell and he gets a promotion for it. I think he even steals it from his best friend Herc, who started off as a meathead but is now a better officer and is instilling what he learned from the detail onto the next generation of cops. So you see the two different paths two cops can go. In any capitalist system, the product is everything. It defines the business model, the profit margin, and the relationship between the corporation and the consumer. For the Barkstdale crew, heroin is the product, but The Wire goes far beyond just treating it like a normal drug. The show treats the drug as a commodity that represents a broader critique: how capitalism thrives on the exploitation of human suffering, addiction, and economic despair. That's why drugs are the perfect capitalist product. It creates a dependency, it ensures repeat customers, and it doesn't require expensive marketing or any shelf space. The demand is already there. The community is broken, jobs are scarce, and people are desperate. The drugs fill that void, and that's exactly what makes it profitable. This dehumanization of the consumer, though, isn't unique to drug dealers. It's a feature of modern capitalism. Customers are just data points. Addictions, whether to substances or services, is the end goal of almost every producer. Big Tobacco did it, Big Tech does it, and so do the Barkstdales. The line between a heroin fiend and an algorithm-addicted user scrolling endlessly through content on YouTube is thinner than we'd like to actually admit. Capitalism rewards those who can tap into the human weaknesses, and in fact, one of the best things about The Wire is how little attention is paid to the actual product itself. We don't see the manufacturing, we rarely see the consumption, we almost never see a recovery, and that's intentional. The drug isn't the story, the system is. The product could be anything, but it's also poison, and that's the genius of the metaphor. Because in The Wire, the product is killing the people who buy it, the people who sell it, and the society that allows it, and nobody stops it because it's profitable. By the time season 1 ends, it's clear that after all the surveillance work, all the wiretap stakeout, all the lives lost, nothing changed. Avon might be in jail, and a few people in the game are dead or locked up. The pieces have been shuffled around, but the corners are still running. McNulty got reassigned to a boat, and that's interesting for season 2. Omar is also back to robbing drug dealers. Stringer Bell is making sure the business is still running, so nothing changed. All that death, all that money, everything that was spent this entire season was for nothing. The ending reminded me of the very first scene of episode 1. The story about how Snot Biggie was able to keep participating in the game even though he tries to rob the game every time is analogous to how capitalism allows you to keep playing as long as you can keep playing. The only way to stop is to not play, or you can die. If you juxtapose that opening scene with the final scene of the first season of Omar coming back in the game, I think that's the perfect bookend to the season, and as someone who hasn't seen the later seasons, I can't help but to think it's foreshadowing for the death of Omar. He won't stop playing the game until he's dead and can no longer play. That's the genius of The Wire. It refuses to offer false hope. That was what I got from season 1 of The Wire. But guys, did you like this video? Let me know in the comment section below. Hit the subscribe button because I will be starting season 2 and I will be breaking down season 2 just like I did this one. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, peace.